You saw that plate in the thumbnail, and I know exactly what you thought, that it looks too plain to matter, that nobody could build a morning on cornmeal, stale bread, and a splash of milk. But that plain plate kept whole families standing through the worst decade this country ever survived, and it can do the same for you right now. Here is the claim I am going to prove to you before we are done. The breakfasts that carried people through the 1930s cost pennies, filled bellies until noon, and used almost no fuel. They were not sad, they were engineering. They were quiet genius, born at kitchen tables where every scrap had a second life. I learned these at my grandmother's elbow in a narrow kitchen in eastern Ohio, standing on a milk crate so I could see the top of the stove. And I am going to hand you the one she guarded most, a trick written up in a United States Department of Agriculture bulletin back in 1933 that lets you cook a hot breakfast overnight with no flame at all. You can do it this weekend in the smallest apartment on almost no money. For years I ignored every word she told me. I bought the boxed cereal. I bought the drive-through biscuit. I told myself the old ways were for people who had no choice. Then prices climbed, my dollar shrank, and I went back to that narrow kitchen in my memory looking for help. What I found there changed how I eat every single morning. So let me start where she started. She started with mush. Now stay with me, because I know how that sounds. Cornmeal boiled in water sounds like something you feed to livestock. But in 1932, when a man in Youngstown might earn nothing for weeks at a stretch, a single bag of cornmeal was survival itself. Here is what most people never understood about mush. It was never one meal, it was three. The first morning, my great-grandmother boiled cornmeal with water and a pinch of salt until it went thick and soft, and that was breakfast, hot in the bowl with whatever milk they had. But she always made far more than they could eat. The extra she poured into a bread pan and set in the cold pantry overnight. By morning it had set up firm as a brick. She sliced it, laid the slices in a hot skillet with the smallest smear of grease, and fried them till the edges went gold and crisp. That fried mush, with a drizzle of syrup or a little bacon drippings, was a breakfast a child would run to the table for. One pot of cheap meal became a hot bowl one day, and crisp golden slices the next. Nothing thrown away, nothing wasted. And here is the number that stops me cold every time. A family could eat this way for weeks on what a single fast breakfast costs you today. I make it now with plain yellow cornmeal that runs under $1 a pound. 1 cup of dry meal to 4 cups of water feeds a whole family. Let it bubble low and slow, stir so it does not clump, and you will taste why they trusted it. But cornmeal was only the foundation, because the real trouble came when the bread went stale, and in those years, throwing out bread was almost a sin, so they turned the stale bread into something they gave a strange and tender name. They called it graveyard stew. Some called it milk toast, and I will be honest with you, the first time my grandmother said those words to me I thought she was teasing. But there was nothing grim about it. The name came from how gentle it was, soft enough for the oldest grandparent with no teeth left and the sickest child in the house. It was the meal you made when someone needed comfort and there was nothing fancy in the cupboard. Here is how it went. You took bread that had gone hard, the kind you would be tempted to toss, and you toasted it until it was dry and a little brown. You warmed milk in a pan with a knob of butter if you had it, a pinch of salt, sometimes a spoon of sugar. You broke the toast into a bowl and poured the hot milk over the top and let it sit 1 minute until the bread drank it in. That was it. That was a breakfast that soothed people through influenza winters and empty wallet months alike. Doctors in the 1930s actually recommended milk toast for anyone weak or recovering because it was warm, easy, and gentle on the stomach. And in a home where a loaf could not be wasted, it meant that not one slice ever hit the trash. Think about that. The very bread you throw out today was somebody's warm breakfast, and it cost them nothing but the will to not waste it. I keep a paper bag in my kitchen now. Every heel of bread, every slice going stale, goes in that bag. When it fills, that is graveyard stew, or it becomes the base for the trick I will show you at the end. But something bothered me for years about all of this, a question I could not shake. These breakfasts had almost no meat in them. So how on earth did grown men doing hard labor stay full and strong on bread and milk and corn? The answer is the cleverest thing in this whole story, and it is where I finally understand who profited from us forgetting. They stretched. That was the whole secret, and it is a lost art now. In those homes, a single egg did not feed one person. A single egg fed 5. Let me tell you how. Because when I first watched my grandmother do it, I could not believe my eyes. She made what her family called egg gravy. She would beat 1 egg, sometimes 2 if the hens were kind, and pour it slow into a pan of hot milk, thickened with a spoonful of flour. It swelled and turned into a rich, savory gravy dotted with little ribbons of cooked egg. She poured that over biscuits or over toast, and suddenly 1 egg had become a hot, filling breakfast for the whole table. 1 egg, 5 people, nobody left hungry. Then there was sawmill gravy, the one that got its name from lumber camps, where cooks fed hungry crews on next to nothing. Flour, a little grease, milk, salt, and pepper, whisked into a thick white gravy poured over biscuits. They said the cooks stretched it so thin you could read a newspaper through it, but ladled over hot bread it filled a working man clear through to the noon whistle. It cost almost nothing, and it kept people on their feet. Now here is where I want you to feel something. These stretching methods were not shameful shortcuts. They were skill. They were knowledge passed hand to hand, mother to daughter, at kitchen tables across this country. And somewhere along the way, we were quietly encouraged to forget every bit of it. Because a family that knows how to feed 5 people on 1 egg and a bag of flour is a family that does not need much. And there is no profit in a family that does not need much. Think about who benefits when you believe breakfast has to come from a box, a bag, or a window you drive up to. Every one of those costs many times what a scratch breakfast costs, and every one of them trained us to feel helpless without them. My grandmother was not helpless. She could feed a family through a winter of no work, with skills that lived entirely in her hands and her head. Those skills were taken from us, one convenient product at a time. But they were never lost. They were just waiting. And I need to stop right here, because I can hear what some of you are thinking, and before I go further, I want to point you toward something that holds everything we are covering today and so much more. If these methods are landing with you the way they landed with me, I put the full collection into a book called Depression Proof and its companion volume, Depression Kitchen, where I gathered every recipe, every stretching technique, every fireless cooking method, and every pantry strategy I could trace back to the families who lived through those years and came out standing. It is the book I wish I had found 20 years ago, when I was standing in that narrow kitchen trying to remember what my grandmother knew. You will find it mentioned in the description below this video, and I think it will change how you see your own kitchen the same way this work changed mine. Now, back to exactly where you are sitting right now, because this next part is built for exactly your situation, and it is the part I wish somebody had handed me 20 years ago. You do not need land. You do not need money. You need one pot, one spoon, and a few pennies. Let me give you a full week of breakfasts that a person with almost nothing can make starting tomorrow morning. Start with oats, but not the way the box tells you. In the 1930s, plain rolled oats were one of the cheapest foods in America, and a large sack cost a fraction of a day's wage. You do not need the little flavored packets that charge you triple. Buy the biggest bag of plain rolled oats you can find. 1/2 cup of dry oats and 1 cup of water, a pinch of salt, 5 minutes on the stove, and you have a hot bowl that holds you for hours. Add a spoon of whatever sugar or jam you have. That breakfast costs you pennies, and I mean that literally. Now stretch it the old way. When you cook your oats, make double. What you do not eat, press flat in any dish and leave it in the fridge overnight. In the morning it has set firm, just like the cornmeal mush, and you can fry those slices in a dry or barely greased pan until they crisp. 1 pot, 2 mornings, 2 completely different breakfasts. That is the whole philosophy right there, in a single apartment kitchen. Do the same with bread. Every heel and stale slice you would throw away becomes graveyard stew with nothing but a splash of milk and a little heat. Or beat 1 egg into a bit of milk, soak those stale slices, and fry them, and you have what your grandparents called poor man's French toast, made from the very bread most people bin. 1 egg turns a pile of hard bread into a hot, sweet breakfast for 2 or 3 people. And here is a pantry breakfast that costs almost nothing and shocked me the first time I tried it. Flour, water, a pinch of salt, a little baking powder if you have it, mixed into a loose batter and dropped in a hot pan makes a plain griddle cake. In hard times they called these poor man's pancakes or water pancakes, made with no eggs and no milk at all, just flour and water and heat. Are they fancy? No. Do they fill you up, hot off the pan, with a little syrup or sugar? They kept children fed through the worst years this country has seen. They will keep you fed too. None of this needs a farm. None of it needs a paycheck you do not have. It needs the willingness to do what they did, which was to see food where the rest of the world sees garbage, and to make one thing become 2. But there is one more thing missing from your morning, and it is the thing people in the 30s craved most of all when the money ran out: coffee. And what they did about it is a story on its own. By 1933, real coffee was a luxury that slipped out of reach for millions of families. But people did not simply go without their warm morning cup. They got clever, the way they always did. They stretched their coffee grounds by using them twice, sometimes 3 times, adding a little fresh to the old, so the pot never went completely weak. Nothing was thrown out until every last bit of strength was pulled from it. And when the coffee tin was truly empty, they made their own from things that grew for free. They roasted dandelion roots dug from the yard, dried and browned in a slow oven until dark, then ground them and brewed them like coffee. They roasted barley. They roasted wheat bran. They even browned chicory root, which is exactly what folks in Louisiana had stretched their coffee with for generations. The result was a dark, hot, bitter cup that carried the ritual of morning coffee even when the real thing was long gone. There was a boxed grain drink sold in those years, a roasted cereal beverage that mothers gave to the whole family because it cost less than coffee and had no jitter to it. Families leaned on it hard through the lean years, sitting around the table with a warm cup that cost next to nothing. The point was never really the coffee itself. The point was sitting down together, warm cup in hand, facing another hard day as a family. You can do the very same thing tomorrow. If money is tight, use your grounds twice before you toss them. If you want to try the old way, roasting barley or even the crumbs and heels of bread in a dry pan until they are dark, then steeping them in hot water gives you a warm, toasted drink for almost nothing. It is humble, it is real, and it connects your hands to theirs across 90 years. But all of this, the mush, the milk toast, the egg gravy, the roasted grain, was still burning fuel, and fuel cost money too. Coal cost money, wood cost money, and that brings me to the thing my grandmother guarded most closely, the method I promised you at the very start, the one that still stops people cold when they hear it, because the smartest cooks of the Depression learned how to make a hot breakfast with almost no fire at all. Here is what they knew. Heat, once you put it into food, does not need to keep coming from a flame. It just needs to be kept from escaping. And in 1933, the United States Department of Agriculture printed bulletins teaching housewives exactly how to use this to save precious fuel. The device had an old name. They called it the fireless cooker, and some called it the hay box, because the very first ones were nothing more than a box packed tight with hay. This is how it worked, and this is how you will do it this weekend. At night, you put your cereal grain and water in a pot, cornmeal, oats, cracked wheat, whatever you have, and you bring it to a hard boil on the stove for just a few minutes. Then you take it off the heat, clamp the lid on tight, and you bury that pot in something that traps heat. In their day, it was a wooden box crammed with hay, straw, crumpled newspaper, or old blankets, packed all around and on top so no warmth could leak out. Then they went to bed. And all night long inside that insulated nest, the trapped heat kept working, slowly cooking the grain through until it was soft and hot and ready. In the morning they lifted out a pot of finished porridge that had cooked itself for free while the whole family slept. No fire burning all night, no coal spent, no watching the stove. The heat they paid for once did the work of a whole night's cooking. Do you understand what that meant to a family counting every lump of coal? They could have a hot breakfast waiting on a freezing winter morning without spending a single scrap of fuel to make it. That is not a hard times compromise. That is genius that our modern kitchens forgot on purpose. And you can do it tonight with things already in your home. Take your heaviest pot with a tight lid. Put in 1 cup of oats or cracked wheat with 3 cups of water and a pinch of salt. Bring it to a rolling boil for 2 or 3 minutes. No more. Lid on tight. Now wrap that pot in a bath towel, then a blanket, then stuff the whole bundle into a cooler or a cardboard box packed with more towels or crumpled newspaper tight on every side. Leave it overnight 7 or 8 hours. In the morning, unwrap a pot of hot, fully cooked breakfast porridge that cost you 3 minutes of fuel instead of 30. I did not believe it until I tried it. I stood in my kitchen at 6 in the morning, half sure I would lift the lid onto a cold pot of raw oats, and instead a wave of steam rose up and hit my face, and I swear I felt my grandmother standing right beside me. Every winter now I do this. It saves me fuel, it saves me time, and it hands me a hot breakfast the second I wake up. A document printed for struggling families in 1933 still works perfectly in a modern apartment nearly a century later. That is the thing they never wanted you to keep, the knowledge that you can feed yourself well, warm and cheap, with your own 2 hands and a little inherited wisdom. It was set aside so quietly that most of us never noticed it leave. A family that can cook overnight with no fire, stretch 1 egg across 5 plates, and turn stale bread into a warm meal is a family that is very hard to make afraid and very hard to make dependent. And I think that is exactly why it slipped away. But you have it back now. It is sitting in your kitchen tonight, in your heaviest pot and a spare blanket, in the bag of oats and the heel of bread you were about to throw out. What was taken from us was never really lost. It was only waiting for someone willing to listen. The way I finally listened, standing in that narrow Ohio kitchen in my memory. So here is what I want from you, and I am asking straight, because I know this crowd does not speak up unless a man asks plainly. Which one are you going to try first? The overnight fireless porridge, the fried mush, or the graveyard stew your own grandparents might have called by another name? Tell me in the comments, and tell me if your family had a name for any of these, because I read every single one, and those old names are half the treasure. If you feel like something real was quietly taken from you and handed back tonight, then you belong with the rest of us here, the ones digging these methods out of the dirt where they were buried and putting them back to work in our own kitchens. Come stand with us, because next time I am going to show you the depression supper that families cooked once and ate for 4 straight days. And the reason it never spoiled without a refrigerator will change how you think about your own kitchen forever. Stay with me, and I will hand you that one too. Before you go, if this video helped, there's a deeper version waiting for our members. You can ask me your own question and a real person answers, and you'll be among thousands of folks just like you. Point your phone's camera at the code on screen. It takes less than a minute, and you can cancel anytime, no risk.